Hello, my name is Payton Shubrick. I'm CEO and founder of Six Bricks LLC. We're an adult use cannabis shop in Springfield, Massachusetts, who recently underwent a process to seek an address change to 1860 Main Street, also known as the Republican Building in Springfield. Monday night, we received a unanimous vote, and that is now our official address. And we look forward to going in front of the Cannabis Control Commission to get their official approval and then move into final licensure.
That's awesome. Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
So, can you tell us a little bit of? I'm sure that there's been a bit of a regulatory nightmare associated with a lot of getting this business off the ground, especially locally there in Springfield. Do you mind kind of outlining that process?
I don't mind at all. I honestly wouldn't describe it as a nightmare for me personally speaking. I graduated from College of the Holy Cross in 2015 and moved back to my hometown of Springfield, Massachusetts, and began working at a financial service company by day and interning with the city council by night. In 2016, when the voters voted for it, I had a front row seat to city councilors starting to figure out what the marijuana ordinance would look like in Springfield. I also saw multi-state operators that started to move in to the city of Springfield and talk about how easy it would be for them to secure a license. For context, I was a political science major at Holy Cross with concentrations in Africana studies and peace and conflict studies. So I was very much intrigued by this idea of a city like Springfield being disproportionately impacted by cannabis arrest, and then having folks that weren't from the community be able to financially profit. Reading Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow was extremely eye-opening, and after a few complaints, it became very clear to me that I could either complain about it or do something about it. And so I began setting up mini milestones for myself, but the city council having a transparent process of how they were thinking about zoning and how they wanted to engage neighborhood councils, and me being able to really to study and learn from them as the Cannabis Control Commission was being formed and all these other pieces and parts really gave way to me being able to apply and then successfully secure a license, or excuse me, host community agreement.
That's awesome. So it was a little bit easier for you just because of the vast amount of knowledge that you had going in on not only the Springfield political system, but also kind of just how to work your way around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really an interesting dynamic of having done my homework.
Mhm.
I knew where I potentially would want to locate an establishment. I knew the rules of being located more than 500 square feet away from schools, churches, and community centers. But I think also this idea that I was from the city of Springfield, I thought a lot about the neighbors that knew me and that I knew, and where they would want an establishment and how they wouldn't want their residential lives to be disrupted by a business like this, and how I could best find a location that wouldn't disrupt that. I mean, even through the address change, that was still very much top of mind. I think one of the pros of being from the community is if folks have a complaint, they'll stop you in aisle 5 of Walmart to let you know. And so it's very much this idea that I wanted to do something that the community could be extremely proud of.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that it is something that they can be proud of, especially considering that this is going to be a minority owned and operated business, which is fantastic. And especially considering all of the social equity problems that we see in the cannabis industry, not only in Massachusetts, but on a national level. Do you mind speaking a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so we're 100% owned by people of color and majority owned by women, and that's intentional. I really wanted to make sure that as we went through this process, that we were doing something different and unique. I think what's been interesting for me is that many people commend me as a woman, as a Black woman, for venturing into this space. And I think for me, it wasn't only the idea that I, as an an individual should be participating in this industry, but also how can I engage others that look like me. So even our executive team is primarily made up of women. You have 4 Shubricks on the executive team. Even the company name Six Bricks is an ode to having 6 people in my immediate family, and a majority of them on the executive team, the other 2 just legally not being old enough to be a part of the team. So I tried to, with everything that I did, have this intentionality that I could be doing something that really not only was different from what we were already seeing in the industry, but engaged those that traditionally haven't been engaged in the legal space.
That's excellent. That's perfect. So as far as we're gonna, dial back a little bit and talk
Yeah.
about kind of like how were you introduced to cannabis in the first place?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I went to Springfield Central High School here in the city of Springfield. And so those were my first experiences of a dime bag. And I remember in-house suspension being a place that folks were sent if caught with one. And those were my first experiences. I mean, you also saw people with the spray cans because they were going to go tag walls after school. And it was very much something I'd always was aware that was there, but never engaged in. And then I went to college and you saw it more there. And it was interesting because it was a cross mix of individuals that were using it, right? The stereotypical inner city high school I guess, image really was broken up by being at a school like Holy Cross and seeing other folks that were using it and talking about using it in their elite high schools. And I was like, oh, okay, this is like everywhere. It's not
Right. It's the
it's not
universal.
restricted to urban areas, right? And so that experience for me was very interesting. Once again, not really engaging in the use of it, and then reading Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, and then digging in to understand the science of it really started to change my perspective. But that wouldn't occur until after graduation. And I started to really think about this industry, right? Because that's what it is, and my participation in it, that I really dig into things like the endocannabinoid system and THC and CBD and all of these other things. So, admittedly, at the forefront of my mind was more social justice than a love for the plant that I can now say I proudly have. But previously, it was really just understanding folks that didn't look like me were going to enter my community and financially benefit, and those dollars were going to leave the community.
Right, exactly. And those are people who were not affected by the war on drugs. They're not people that were affected
Exactly.
uh, mass incarceration or anything of that nature, right? Um, so I love this story. I really do, because I think this is a
Thank you.
culmination of everything that we want to see in the cannabis industry, right? We want to see not only social equity, but labor equity as well, right? So people who don't have the opportunity to be they don't have the opportunity to be a CEO, an owner, operator, but they are a person of color who's coming out of this system and hoping that they can now profit off of something that they were incarcerated off of, right?
Oh,
Um,
most definitely.
and making sure that they have accurate representation in the workplace. And so compared to a company, say like Cureleaf in Oxford or Hanover, where social equity is something that they scream about, and it's all over their social media and in some of the things that they do, but not necessarily in their practices in the workplace. Is that something that you intend on making sure happens in your own dispensary?
Yeah, so we have 2 priorities for those that we're going to be hiring, and it's one from the city of Springfield. I think that's extremely important, and 2, those that have been impacted by cannabis prohibition. And it's to say impacted directly and indirectly. I think the reality is what folks don't realize about the war on drugs, or oftentimes is not talked about, is the fact that if you had a mom, dad, aunt, uncle go to jail from this, that impacted you, right? And though indirectly you didn't do the time, that's still an individual in your life that you didn't have time with. And now in that same community, you have multi-state operators that are now legally selling to you and your community, and you might not be able to engage or benefit in a real way by earning an honest wage or doing something outside of being a bud tender. I mean, let's be real. Part of the reason that, folks encourage diversity and inclusion is because it's nice to have bud tenders that are from the community, but if the executive team doesn't look like them either, it sends a clear message.
Right.
And so part of what I hope to be able to do is not just own an establishment, but also be an advocate for other cannabis entrepreneurs that look like me. I mean, women, veterans, people of color to get excited and get interested in this industry. Because I think oftentimes, too, as we think about it right now, it's a retailer cultivation that is kind of the hyper focus. We're going to see delivery, social consumption. You're going to see all the different ways folks can engage. And I hope that as time continues to move us forward, folks will start to think about this as a way that they can have a career and get engaged, regardless of what that looks like.
That's perfect. This is,
Thank
I
you.
love your message. I love everything about it because at CANiVISION, we really try to see both sides of the aisle, right? We want to give everyone an equal playing field and an equal standing in being able to not only share their own story, but share their experiences, the experiences that might not be firsthand. So some anecdotal stuff as well, right? But we also want to be able to boost businesses. And, a lot of companies that are smaller or startups don't have the capital to push like these massive multi-state operators that we see, right? And so giving everyone an equal platform is exactly what we want to do, along with non-biased, real information on the cannabis industry, which is so difficult to find. And so finding someone who is real and is giving us real answers is it's great to see.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, authenticity is really top of mind. Even our tagline for the company is people, plant, and purpose, right? So starting with the people, that's at the center of all we're doing. Then focused on the plant and helping to educate people on it, but always going back to that purpose of why we got started at the beginning. I mean, I love when people reach out to me and are excited about the idea of finding their space in the industry, saying, I didn't think I'd see anybody who looked like me own. And what a powerful message that sends, right? To know that just by you doing what you're doing, you're inspiring someone else to think about entering this industry in a very real way. And they don't see a ceiling. They see all the potential instead. And that's extremely powerful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And then, so as far as like the focus of the dispensary itself, are you guys going to be more recreational? Are you going to be more medical? How's that going to work out?
So we will be 100% adult use, and that is really to ensure a few different things for us. One, that our customers can engage regardless of if they have a medical card or not. And then two, really just to provide access in a way that we hadn't seen previously to the four different groups being selected here in the city of Springfield. So for context, the city of Springfield had one medical shop that was INSA, and then they hosted an RFP last year, request for proposals. For those not familiar with it, 27 groups applied and 4 adult use shops were selected. One of those is open now, the other 3 are in the process of opening, myself included. And so we are 100% adult use.
That's awesome. So what's the timeline look like?
Oh, the $1,000,000 question of when we will open. So we have some work to do, things that are admittedly out of our control regarding we will provide the Cannabis Control Commission with our amended host community agreement and then start to look at our build out. So it'll be a matter of how quickly we can get through the process because we have to go in front of them 2 more times. First for the change of address, the second for final licensure, but in between that, we need to hire staff, perform a build out, to go through some inspections. So don't have a tentative date at this point in time, but if truth be told, I'm not focused entirely on when we'll open, but how we'll open. And I think that's really important. It's been amazing to see the support of the community for folks excited about the idea that someone they went to high school with is now doing this, right? Who thought we'd ever see the day that the same thing that could get you in-house suspension is now a viable business.
That's right. That's right. Now, did you get in-house suspension?
No, never.
Never.
So fun fact, my dad, growing up, it was no drinking, no smoking, bring home all A's, and make sure you're always engaged in a sport. So 3 season varsity athlete. You went from soccer to basketball to track and summer soccer, and you just kind of continued to do that loop. And then I ended up getting a scholarship to Holy Cross for track and field. So definitely is paying off. But fun story is telling my dad that I was not going to law school, despite him paying for me to study for the LSATs and paying for all my books as well, and that I instead wanted to become a legal drug dealer. He's now my chief procurement officer, but it took a little bit of time to convince him that this was a good plan.
Yeah, I hear that. I actually, so my journey started in medical cannabis, right? So I
Okay.
was with CANiVISION Docs. I was their regional marketing director. So kind of explaining to my family, I totally understand that, because it was like, yeah, we know that Joe's not going to go to college. It's not for him, right? Um, so what the hell is he going to do? And all of a sudden I show up and I'm like, yeah, by the way, I know that I just went and got my EMT license and that's what I was going to do, but I just got this really cool opportunity. Um, and I had like none of my family were cannabis users. They were totally against it. Like, no way. Now I'm at a point where I would, I've got like 2 family members that don't have their medical card. Um,
We're not quite at that point yet, but I think the fact that my sister, my mom, they're all on the executive team in different capacities. We're making small strides, but
that's
I
right.
definitely can relate to this idea of nervously thinking through how to tell my family that I wanted to become a legal drug dealer. And I mean, I think the reality is it's very interesting. You can clearly articulate to folks, I want to become a lawyer, and they have a vision in their mind of what that means, right? You go to law school, you work for a big firm, you kind of get some experience under your belt, and there's clear avenues to articulate that I want it to enter the cannabis space without a clear vision of what that look like. I think scares people more than anything else,
Yeah.
especially when you add the stigma around it, right? I mean,
Absolutely. That's like 70% of the job is like,
oh yeah, debunking myths
yeah,
regularly.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. So good. Um, so just on like more fun level, what would you say your favorite mode of consumption is?
Mm, probably edibles. I look forward to a day where we just see more innovation happening in this space, right? I love to see the companies out in California that are removing the alcohol from wine and replacing it with THC, and just all the different ways in which we can continue to debunk myths around the consumption of cannabis and the ways it can help with pain management. I love seeing the shows on Netflix regarding it. And so I think that's my favorite just because there's still so much innovation that's been untapped in that space. So I look forward to gourmet meals that have THC infused in them that are 6 courses and
Oh,
people getting a progressive high as opposed to just kind of taking 3 gummies, not knowing necessarily what's going to
right.
happen and going to bed, right? I look for the evolution in all of that.
Yeah, that's great. We in my household it is all infused olive oil. Uh,
Oh, very nice.
so if we're cooking, there's a good chance there's a little bit of THC in it.
Noted in case I'm ever invited to your home for dinner.
Well, if you'd like to, so my project right now with CANiVISION is my wife and I just bought a 36-foot RV,
Oh, very nice.
and we are moving out of our house, selling all of
Okay,
our furniture, and moving into the RV full time. Um,
very nice.
and we're going to be traveling around the U.S. just covering stories and
Oh, I love it.
businesses like yours, and really just bringing light to what's going on, what's really going on in cannabis, because you can see it all over. Yahoo Finance does things all the time on Curaleaf. They do all things all the time on GTI and Kronos and these larger operators, but you don't see anything about craft cannabis. You don't see anything about small business owners. You don't see any of the big moves that are made in social equity. The MORE Act going through the House was
Yes.
fantastic. That brought a lot of attention, which is really about all we can ask for right now, right?
Yes. No, I loved it. I mean, I loved the amount of folks who were tagging me in articles, right? I thought it was amazing just to see the interest. But kudos to you and your wife. I mean, that's definitely exciting. I think we need more coverage of small businesses in this space, and really to understand that, as I said before, an industry in my mind has so many different slices of the pie, and it's not a matter of protecting minds, right? It's a matter of how do I share it and get a bigger piece because of the collaboration, the natural competition possible. So I look forward to hopefully inviting you to a grand opening and seeing this awesome RV roll up to 1860 Main Street.
I'm there. You let me know. We'll go do that. We'll pick up some products. We'll head over to MGF.
Great. I want to hear also the horn too, because I hear that it's always something different when it comes to the RVs. So
Installing something.
okay, all right.
Little birds, but we
Love it, love it.
So I'm loving everything right now. This is such a great conversation, and it's honestly inspiring to see that these things are actually happening. You know what I mean? Like, we hear about social equity all the time. We hear about small businesses all the time, but we never really see it coming to fruition in real time. So I want to thank you, one, for taking the time to talk with me today, and two, for being so open and sharing. I think that the open communication that you are giving to everyone with all of the articles that are coming out, the attention that you've been getting with the media, is fantastic.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. And like I said, part of it is really less about me and more about shining a light on what's possible in this industry. If I can inspire just one person, I feel like I've done my job in terms of getting folks to understand all the possibilities that are really ahead of us, some that are tapped and some that are untapped at this point in time. So I look forward to continuing to share messages of possibility and excitement around this industry, around this space, and getting to meet folks like yourself that are doing the work that so desperately needs to be done. So I hope that this is the first of many conversations that we can have.
That's absolutely right. And likewise.